Chapter 11, When Magic Leads the Way. The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Majora's Mask. By Ganondorf 8. October 21, 2015. Chapter 11, When Magic Leads the Way. Oof! I moaned as I landed on what looked like a small raised platform which was glowing in several colors. I then looked up to make sure that none of the Deku scrub guards were following me, and my heart felt relieved knowing that we weren't being followed. After getting up because of landing on my rear, I walked a few steps forward before taking the time to look around this underground cave. It looked relatively peaceful, which makes you wonder why such a cave would exist below the Deku Palace, yet I suppose it's a mystery which may not have an answer. There was the sound of water coming from a passage to the right, but it was the sound of someone munching away to the left that caught my attention, and it was a sound which I remember from before. Only he has that specific chewing sound. You can tell just by listening to something like that? Asked Twilight. When you've heard it as much as I did during a conversation, it sort of gets engraved into your memory, I replied. Walking up to where the path splits into two directions, I turned left, which looked like a dead end, but light coming from the next corner made me suspect that it was an exit, but where it would take me remains to be seen, and if it sends me somewhere filled with numerous Deku Scrubs guards, well, I don't think I'd be surviving such an encounter. That's when I noticed someone was sitting down nearby holding a large bag, and he constantly thrusted his hand into it before pulling it back out, and munching on what I suspected were beans. He showed no signs of slowing down such eating habits, so hopefully nothing ends up happening to him such as indigestion. I don't believe it, said Twilight. Just like before, I moaned. No wonder you knew it was him because of how he chews on those beans, but why is he here of all places? Asked Twilight. Sitting in front of me bare-chested was Snips, a student from Canterlot High, who at one time served as one of my lackeys who carried out my plans when I was the bad girl before accepting friendship into my heart. Even now after all this time, I still feel bad about how I used both him and Snails like that without taking their own feelings into consideration. I mean, they both forgave me for what I did, but deep down those wounds probably still exist, and won't be healed for quite some time. Sunset? Are you okay? Twilight asked due to noticing that I was daydreaming. Does seeing Snips remind you of how you used to be? Yeah, and I still feel pretty bad that I treated him and Snails like slaves, I replied. They did get over it, said Twilight. I know, but it's something I never should have done in the first place, I said. My heart started to pound rather quickly because of my feelings, but these weren't feelings of love. No, not in the least. They were feelings of shame, shame that I had done a great wrong. One of many after the fall formal last year where I had to spend time apologizing to everyone at CHS because of my immaturity. It took a long time for me to earn their trust, and while I'm no longer that old version of me who was cruel and dishonest, I still had moments where I regress back to those days, such as feeling guilty, or releasing pent-up rage due to feeling frustrated. Twilight, this is another instance of me having to suffer because of my actions, I said as I pressed my back up against the cave wall. Just because I'm in a much better place now doesn't mean what I did can just be forgotten simply by snuffing it out like it were a candle. I never knew you felt this way, said Twilight. While our friends helped me along, there were times where I had to tackle these issues on my own, I said. If only I had known much sooner, I could have helped, said Twilight. No, you wouldn't have, because in your heart, you didn't exactly trust me, especially after the fall formal, yet it was a friendship which took time to forge. These days, you would help regardless, but back then was a much different time, I said. My words sounded rather cruel from my perspective, but they were the honest truth. After the formal, people kept looking at me with such disdain because I made them miserable, what with manipulating, lying, scheming, and more where that came from, yet deep down in my heart, I had to suffer this way in order to atone for my actions. Twilight then rubbed her wings against my face before she started to shed some tears, and I had no intention of stopping her from doing so. Actually, I began crying a little as well because thinking back on my past gives me both pain and pleasure. Pain because of being reminded, and pleasure because of having overcome such obstacles in my life. Feeling better now? Asked Twilight. A little, I answered. You just have to remain positive, Sunset, and don't allow the past to consume you even though you can't forget about it. What you did wrong can be used to show others not to fall into the same situation, and you can tell them that despite what happened, people will be forgiving, said Twilight. She then smacked herself in the forehead upon remembering that I've already done something like that, and it was for her human counterpart who became corrupted by equestrian magic. I was able to show her the path of both forgiveness and redemption, which is what Twilight herself offered me.
I wasn't about to let the cycle continue, I said.
What do you mean? Asked Twilight.
Sorry, just thinking out loud,
I replied while blushing, yet I suspected Twilight knew what I meant because she had a skeptical look on her face. That's when a loud burp began to echo throughout the cave, and despite how disgusting it sounded, it reminded me of needing to speak to Snips, who probably is wondering why a Deku scrub and fairy were interacting with each other, so after gulping really hard on my throat, I walked up to him where he turned to pay attention to me.
Hey? A Deku scrub? I didn't think any of you would find me down here. Still, you seem different from the regular Deku I hear walking about up there, as though you weren't really one of them, but don't pay me any mind, for I can't judge on appearances,"
said Snips. He stopped pulling beans from his bag because he knew that eating while talking to someone would be just plain rude, and then he reached into a pocket where he pulled out a magic bean. Just like in Hyrule.
"How did you get down here?"
I asked.
"The Deku Palace is usually not under heavy security, so it was easy for me to slip through their defenses and come down here. Ever since their princess went missing a few days ago, there have been more Deku running around here than ever before,"
replied Snips.
"Do you know anything about a temple?"
I asked.
"That's common knowledge, even though the Deku insist that it's for their royal family only,"
replied Snips, who suddenly raised his hand before plunging it into his bag, and pulling out some beans before eating them, which made me gag on the inside of my mouth.
"Sorry about that, but I was feeling peckish."
I glowered at him with such a cold stare. He slowly took his hand out of the bag, and placed it a few inches away.
"Ahem. The temple is said to be hidden somewhere in Woodfall, yet the location is known to the royal family only as they go there in order to pray to the guardian who protects this region from dark forces." "The Deku princess and a monkey went there," I said. "She would be able to gain access to the temple since she knows what needs to be done to make it appear, but why would she want to go there in the first place? Ever since that poison started seeping into the water, Woodfall has slowly succumbed, and is showing no signs of returning to normal,"
said Snips. I looked at him with an odd expression, for I didn't think he would be aware of what was happening outside of this cave, yet he felt rather offended by my reaction.
"Just because I'm living down here doesn't mean my knowledge of the world above is next to nothing."
"Sorry," I said.
"You want to go to this temple, don't you?"
asked Snips.
"Was I that obvious?"
I asked.
"Most Deku scrubs would never dream of inquiring about the temple, for they are forbidden to go there in addition to knowing the secret that reveals it. You on the other hand are different. As though something in your heart was telling you to do something, yet you don't know what exactly,"
replied Snips. His words rang true in my heart, as even though I want to help out, I wasn't sure what I could do given my lack of knowledge, but then the thought of the monkey imprisoned in the cage was what I need to deal with. If he knows anything regarding the temple, then asking him is a sure bet, provided he is willing to speak. I decided not to tell that little tidbit to Snips in case he thought of me as being a weird Deku, even though I am human. A pony.
"So, you sell beans?"
I asked in an attempt to change the subject.
"Well, you're the first customer I've had in a long time. The Deku who I sell them to hasn't been by here for a while now, so I've been sitting here on my own with all of these beans, and it's been a frustrating time,"
replied Snips. I had taken several steps backward because those latter words felt worrisome, but then I moved forward again, which made him suspect me of being interested in his wares.
"Do you need any magic beans? They sprout leaves as soon as you water them, which will cause them to grow up in an instant. Of course, I cannot sell you any water, so you can use a bottle, and pick up some water by that spring in the opposite direction." "They need water?"
I asked.
"Were you expecting something else?"
asked Snips. Back in Hyrule, planting a magic bean merely caused it to sprout and nothing more, yet it seems in Termina, planting a bean isn't enough, and that water is needed to make it grow instantly rather than having to wait 7 years. From Snip's perspective, I wasn't able to answer his question, making me look foolish, so then he sighed before continuing, but not before grabbing his bag of beans, which prompted me to glower at him again, where he held it without reaching into it with his hand.
"I'll give you one free sample, so try planting it in some soft soil. You can always buy more, for I have no plans on leaving this area anytime soon." "How much?"
I asked.
"Only 10 rupees for one magic bean," replied Snips.
It sounded too good to be true because of how I ended up paying a fortune for the same beans last time, but since this was a different version of Snips, he sounded really sincere about the price. Besides, this first bean was a freebie which wasn't too bad, but then where can I find soft soil with which to plant one? The monkey who wanted me to come here mentioned something about a location where I can plant a magic bean, yet my mind was drawing a blank which prompted Snips to shed some light for me.
If you head that way towards the light which is shining down from above, you can get back to the surface, and end up on the opposite side of the palace. I heard that some monkeys were playing around in that area as though they were trying to get to something. Really? There's no need for me to go back the way I came through?
I asked.
Not unless you want to be captured by those Deku,
replied Snips. He then handed over the bean to me where I looked down at it. It really was just like before where he was selling them, and I ended up purchasing all that he had, but I don't think I'll be buying them quite as often if not at all depending on what future challenges come my way.
Do you have a bottle?
Snips asked me this quite suddenly which caught me off guard.
Unless you have one to fill up with the necessary water needed for that magic bean, you're pretty much stuck. I have one,
I said as I brandished it before him.
In that case, help yourself to as much water as you would like,
said Snips.
Well, I only need the one bottle full,
I said.
There is a sign over there by the water's edge which states that people are allowed to take as much water as they want for souvenir purposes, and apparently it was written by the Swamp Tourist Center as means of publicity. Sometimes, I wonder why they even bother given most people don't come here to Woodfall for the water as there isn't any special properties in it anyway. If you ever have need for more magic beans, I'll be waiting around here munching on my own bean stash, or you could buy some from the Deku who is located outside of the Swamp Tourist Center,
said Snips. Since I no longer had any business with him, he dipped his hand into the bag before resuming his eating, and I simply turned around, and walked back towards where the sound of water was coming from.
Quite the small body of water,
commented Twilight.
How do you suppose it got down here?
I asked.
One of the great mysteries of this world,
replied Twilight.
Well, we need to fill this bottle up with water, and use it on the bean which Snips gave to me,
I said. I then realized that I was still holding onto the magic bean, so I quickly put it into one of my pockets before I drop it by accident or something. The body of water didn't look all that deep, but Twilight reminded me that Deku scrubs have trouble dealing with water, so I figured walking into the water without going too deep will be enough for me to fill a bottle full of the stuff.
Okay, this will only take a few moments, but if you see me going too far in, let me know, and I'll move back.
Twilight nodded in approval of my request, and I stepped forward where I began to submerge myself into the water. It certainly felt strange, but maybe it's because I'm a Deku scrub, and my body doesn't like it, so upon reaching an ideal spot which Twilight insisted because she warned me that I was about a step or two away from hopping due to simple reaction, I took out the bottle Chrysalis gave me. I suppose it felt strange using something given to me by a villain, for that is what she was according to Twilight, but in this world she was very kind even if her shop could do with some sprucing up in the future what with all those knickknacks around. Taking the bottle, I pulled out the cork before scooping up some water which made for quite the splashing sound, and when I was satisfied that it was filled to the brim, I recorked it, and carefully put into one of my pouches as I don't want to accidentally waste it. With that out of the way, I slowly waddled back to land before climbing out, and shaking myself off as though I were a dog before heading back to where Snips was still eating his beans.
I forgot to mention something,
began Snips.
What's that?
I asked.
You need to plant the bean first, and then apply the water to it otherwise it won't grow. Just because it has magical properties, it doesn't mean that a magic bean is capable of performing miracles,
replied Snips. I'm not sure why he brought that up considering I knew what I had to do, but maybe he thinks that I don't understand, and is merely doing what he thinks is best to make sure that I get the proper results I'm looking for.
Remember also that you need to plant it in soft soil, so be sure to look around for anything that resembles a small patch of dirt with a tiny hole at its center.
Again, he didn't need to tell me something I already knew, but again he assumed that I don't know. Sighing to myself without him noticing me do it, I thanked him again before turning to the right, and walking towards another slightly raised groove which was right below another hole.
That was certainly informative,
commented Twilight.
But I already knew that stuff,
I moaned.
Maybe, but perhaps you forgot,
asked Twilight. I then slapped myself in the forehead yet again, for how could I have not taken that into consideration? I may have done a lot of things during my adventures in Hyrule via that other video game, but that was several months ago, so obviously there would be things I don't remember such as Epona's song which could be very useful as it would allow me to get around quicker as opposed to doing so on foot.
No need to feel ashamed, Sunset, as I'm just as guilty when it comes to forgetting things. Since when do you forget anything? I asked. I forgot about my old friends back in Canterlot for over a year, and I had to go through a lot of personal experiences just to resolve the issue. It made me realize that just because my life has changed completely, I shouldn't forget about old friends who were there for me during difficult times.
Replied Twilight.
Wow, I never would have pegged you for that, I said. I'm not perfect, said Twilight. No one ever really is, no matter how much they think so in their minds, I said.
Once again, it felt good talking to Twilight about my problems, yet deep down I wish that we could do this far more often, either in the human world, or in Equestria. Doing so through my friendship reports is fine and all, but I do appreciate talking to someone in person about my fears and insecurities. Perhaps that's a reason why I wanted to befriend Twilight's human counterpart, because of wanting someone to talk to, but also because she needed someone who has had the same experiences to guide her along. Speaking of her, I wonder if we will run into the other Twilight in Termina? I mean, we've encountered people from both worlds, so it's entirely possible that she is somewhere around here.
What are you thinking about?
Asked Twilight.
About the other Twilight, I replied. I still felt strange seeing another version of myself, but from what you and the others told me about what happened, it seems she needs friends now more than ever, especially when it comes to dealing with her own inner demons as well as understanding magic. She was very lucky that the magic she inadvertently absorbed didn't destroy her or anything, but perhaps the whole experience will show her something which she has chosen to keep closed for such a long time.
Said Twilight.
Friendship? I asked. Among other feelings, and you and the rest of our friends will need to guide her along,
replied Twilight. It sounded like she didn't want to help her counterpart, yet I can understand why, because of the whole interacting with your other self mentality. Twilight is probably the one person who needs the most reassurance when it comes to the other Twilight, for I think it still creeps her out even though she should be used to it given how most ponies in Equestria have a human version of them. Guess this is something she will have to come to terms with when she feels ready.
I'm sure this is something which can be figured out. Just come through the portal whenever you have free time after this is all taken care of, I suggested. I think I'll do just that, said Twilight.
Her words hid her true feelings on the matter, yet who am I to force her into confronting the other Twilight? I should just allow them to take their time to come to an appropriate understanding, for forcing the issue could make things worse, and that can result in friendships being destroyed. Something all too familiar for me given that's what I used to do before accepting it.
Anyway, we need to keep going, so try standing on that groove, and see what happens.
Twilight wasn't fooling me in the least, but I won't force the issue on her as I know she wouldn't do the same in return if I were in her position. I looked up at the ceiling out of curiosity, and it looked rather shoddy as though this entrance was only made recently, but then could Snips have done this? He certainly doesn't appear capable of it, but then his appearance belies his true skills, and I shouldn't judge based on looks alone. Standing on the groove, I suddenly felt myself being pulled up by a magical force, and while my mind wanted me to run, I decided to stick with it as there was no other exit apart from where I entered.
Where are we?
I asked as I closed my eyes prior to a bright light blinding me.
Back outside,
replied Twilight. I opened my eyes and looked around, and she was right in that we were outside, but in a completely different area of the palace. It didn't take long for me to figure out our precise location as the waterfall from before was now in front of us, and a massive wall prevented us from going any further, thus making this part of the palace a dead end.
Snips said that those monkeys have been around here, so perhaps this is where that secret route is we need to take in order to get to the imprisoned monkey. If we can find some soft soil, then the magic bean will serve its purpose, I said. Do you even know what it looks like?
Asked Twilight.
I've planted a few beans before in Hyrule, but I'll admit when I say that soft soil isn't easy to find as it's usually hidden pretty well. This could take us about an hour or so before we even find it, so we might as well get started.
I replied. Twilight bopped me on my hat as though she wanted to show me something, so when I paid attention to her, she was pointing towards the ground where I could see the soft soil we need for the magic bean.
Oh. Well. I guess that was easier than I thought.
In my mind, this was really embarrassing, so I quickly closed my mouth before I can say something even more humiliating, and then took out the bean from my pocket before planting it into the ground, making sure to plant it right in the middle of the soil.
So, what happens now?
Asked Twilight.
Just give it a few seconds, I replied.
We both watched, and soon a small sprout popped out of the ground indicating that the bean was ready to be watered.
Most plants take several weeks or so before they sprout, yet these beans do so in mere seconds, so now I need to apply water so as to make it grow.
Hopefully your bottle is still intact, said Twilight.
I didn't do anything dangerous, so it should still be in one piece,
I said as I took it out of my pouch. The water swirled around in the bottle at a fast pace which could make people feel queasy, but I wasn't affected by such a thing, so I uncorked the bottle before splashing its contents on top of the sprout.
Now we have to wait again.
A few seconds later, the sprout suddenly to enlarge until it had reached its full growth, yet it was certainly surprising to see it happen so fast.
There we go, Twilight. While that was an impressive sight, Sunset, I'm not sure how we can use this,
said Twilight.
By stepping onto it, the plant will hover into the air, and allow us to reach whatever we're supposed to get to,
I said.
Magic?
Asked Twilight.
Pretty much, yet even though it isn't as impressive as what's seen in Equestria, it's still pretty good,
I replied. Before using the magic bean, I noticed 2 Deku Babas nearly which looked wilted, but rather than going over and destroy them, I decided to ignore them as it would just be pointless to destroy creatures without a good reason. Once I stepped onto the plant, it rose upwards revealing that there was a small gap in the wall which turned to the right to form a passageway.
Strange how no one in the palace is aware of this,
said Twilight.
That should make things easier for us, I said.
Sometimes, I really should think before I say anything. For the moment I walked down the passageway where it turned to the left, I found myself back in the large area that was to the right of the main hallway, yet now at a much higher elevation.
Well, this is unexpected. Since we're up here now, the Deku scrub guards down below won't be able to notice us, but if you were to accidentally drop to the ground, they are likely to spot you as you won't have enough time to make any kind of reaction. Still, I'm surprised that this upper portion doesn't have anything protecting it,
said Twilight.
Oh, they'll have something,
I moaned.
What makes you think that?
Asked Twilight.
It just looks too easy,
I replied. I then jumped down onto a wooden archway due to it having a Deku flower on top of it, and then I began to observe the area from this perspective where I noticed another Deku flower on top of a floating platform. It looks like flying is going to be needed if I'm to make it to the next section, but I've only had a few experiences, so I'm going to need to bring my A game. That's when I noticed a third flower off in the distance, yet this one was red in color as opposed to pink and green like this one here is. It looked suspicious, so I walked forward hoping to get a little closer to it, and that's when a different looking Deku scrub popped out of the flower where it observed its surroundings before hiding back down again.
See? I told you things looked easy upon a first glance, so now we have to deal with monsters, and I think I remember seeing them in Hyrule, but not that often. Those are mad scrubs, and if it isn't obvious due to their colors and mannerisms, they are constantly annoyed, which makes them a little difficult to deal with. They will pop up from their flowers before spitting out Deku nuts in a barrage, and then pause for a few seconds before resuming their onslaught again. They are cowardly in nature, for if you get too close to them, they will dive down into their flowers, thus preventing you from attacking them,
said Twilight.
Can I attack them from a distance?
I asked.
If you have Deku nuts, you can drop them down on top of them, but that would involve you flying above them,
replied Twilight. Now this was something I never knew before until she brought it up, and it makes me wish that I had Deku nuts on my person, yet I don't, so I'll have to use another tactic. Still, it does give me a new means of fighting monsters as I don't necessarily have to confront them, but rather attack from above if I've got the correct height.
You can also use those bubbles of yours, but remember that you have little magic power as you haven't been collecting any magic jars to restore it.
Once again, I slapped myself in the forehead because of neglecting that. I know slapping myself like that makes me look foolish, yet I deserve it due to being ignorant about the very basics of this game.
You shouldn't keep doing that to yourself, Sunset, as you're bound to leave a bruise. It helps me remind myself that I can do better, I said. Well, if you can find some of those magic jars, be sure to pick them up, or you could buy something which can restore magic, said Twilight. Because I now have a bottle, I can buy potions, or collect fairies and use them when I've been killed in battle, yet for now I'll just have to contend with the fact that it's empty, and fill it up with something later, or maybe after I reset time, as I have a feeling that I can't take healing items whenever I do that. Smashing pots should provide results, I said while diving into the Deku flower before launching myself. As I quickly took out the flowers which grant me the ability to fly in the air, I looked down in fear of the Deku scrubs noticing me, and subsequently trying to shoot me down with their own magic bubbles, yet none of them paid any attention, and continued with their patrol. I breathed a sigh of relief knowing they won't bother me unless I accidentally drop to the ground, so I have to make sure not to do that.
I then landed on the platform which houses the second Deku flower, and the mad scrub began attacking, but its Deku nuts just fell short of their target, and I responded by firing a bubble, making sure to aim carefully so as to not waste my magic. My bubble hit its target, and the mad scrub collapsed before shattering into brown leaves, which caused the Deku flower it used to become like the one I used.
So defeating them allows you to use their flowers,
said Twilight.
That must be how I can make it across, I said. But again, you need to conserve your magic until you can restore it,
said Twilight. Not being able to use my own equestrian magic, and being forced to rely on the magic of Terminal was really annoying, yet I suppose it was meant to be given how I relied too much on my magic in Hyrule. I needed to hone my other skills rather than use what is only natural all the time. Diving into the Deku flower I was standing on, I took to the sky and hovered over to the now available flower which the mad scrub had, and when I landed on the platform, I could see more of them further ahead in the next section along with additional mad scrubs.
Looks like I'm going to be doing a lot of flying,
I moaned.
Think of it like it were a test back in Equestria,
smiled Twilight.
I haven't had one of those in years,
I moaned.
Oh. Well. You can still apply what you've learned at Canterlot High to do this sunset. You just need to be patient when making your way across, as you don't want to be knocked out of the sky by any wayward Deku nuts. Also, you may get some of your own which are dropped by mad scrubs, but the chances of that are pretty slim. Also, it looks like some platforms with Deku flowers move about, so aim accordingly and when they are within range,
said Twilight. Patience. That's something I used to take for granted, for that's what helped start my problems, which resulted in me leaving Equestria. I wanted everything right there and then, and refused to wait for it because in my mind back then, I had no desire to wait as it meant my potential was being wasted. Twilight is right in that I need to approach this with patience, so that we can get through this. Jumping into the next flower, I launched myself over the wall which had a small piece removed as though it were expecting me, and to the next flower before having to drop down to the platform in order to avoid an incoming Deku nut. As I prepared myself to deal with the mad scrub ahead, I should have been paying more attention towards the other walls because equestrian magic was coming from the one that was furthest away from me.
I thought we were going after her instead of Sunset Shimmer. That is still our intention, yet I needed to come back here out of curiosity at best, and to also answer a question which has been plaguing me. What kind of question? You told me that Sunset was able to absorb the magic of her friends, and used it to become something truly radiant. I know you wouldn't lie to me because you came into existence in the exact same manner, yet through more of a negative connotation, but still, she has achieved a new power which makes me feel inadequate.
The first demon began to burn up on the inside due to this revelation, and was about to explode in a fit of jealous rage, yet it was able to remain calm as though something were holding it back. It flew over towards a group of trees by the edge of the palace before striking at them with various claw swipes as a means of venting out frustration, but the other demon ignored this, and was more focused on observing what was happening around it.
How did she achieve that form? Could she really be the real thing? Am I nothing more than a shadow of the past who no longer has any need of existence?
The first demon sounded sad as though it could cry, but then it slammed both hands into a tree before slumping down in utter defeat before being joined by the second demon.
You're allowing your emotions to cloud you. And what else can I do? Understand the situation, and use it to your advantage. Because you are the dark aspect of her personality, you are capable of the same thing she used. Being able to absorb magic from various individuals into your own being.
The second demon then presented what looked like a scroll before it used its fingers to scribble down something before presenting it to the other one.
Let's use some logic here to figure this one out. Both of you are essentially the same person, so therefore you both possess similar, yet different traits because of certain choices.
The demon then noticed its comrade was looking bored, so it knocked some sense into it which made the other really annoyed at first, but then it simmered down.
The problem is you are tied to the past because of what used to be, yet that no longer works for she has moved on from it despite some lingering moments. I should embrace the future. Which would mean absorbing several forms of magic into your being all at once. You make it sound so easy. If she and my significant other are capable of it, you are as well, and I suppose that includes me seeing as I am the result of it. Maybe, but what if such a plan doesn't work? Why wouldn't it? She uses the light inside of her heart as a source of strength, and such light can destroy darkness. Something I learned the hard way. She has a fiery passion which combined with her temperament, makes me nothing more than her empty shadow. A being which shouldn't even exist, yet does. If you think I'm giving up my desire to become the real her, and fulfill the original desire she had, which was to acquire power and conquer Equestria. No, I haven't abandoned that path, yet the chances of success are slim. I see that I've got a lot of work ahead of me in order to make you understand, but it's worth the challenge seeing as it will add to my knowledge.
The second demon then dropped the scroll, which burned to ashes, and it turned towards the first one, who felt confused.
I owe you that much at least, for you were the one who was able to enable me to exist despite my significant other being purified.
It then rose to its feet before extending its hand out to the first demon, who accepted it.
Once I have finished making you understand, you will become even more than she ever was, and you will come to accept that you have a different goal instead of longing for a lost past. Abandon my current goal for another. She has accepted the past, and you must do the same, otherwise your truest desire will forever be dashed. Now come on. We have to find the other one first, for there is something I need from her before I can begin acquiring that succulent knowledge which I crave. I have a pretty good idea as to where she is when our world was changed into this one, so follow me, and try not to fall behind, okay? We must find my other self. Twilight Sparkle.
The two demons then vanished into the night, yet I never sensed their presence this time, as though they were hiding their equestrian magic. That, or I was too preoccupied with trying to make it through to wherever it is I've got to reach.
How much further do we have to go?
I asked.
There is an opening up there,
replied Twilight. I looked upward, and there was an entrance which didn't really look inconspicuous or anything, given it was just out in the open, but at least we didn't have much further to go.
I've got to admit, Sunset, that you made some impressive moves while we were making our way here, and you've got your previous experiences to thank for that.
My magic power ended up running out just before I reached the other area of the palace, and since there were mad scrubs in the way, I had to rely on more unconventional tactics to proceed forward.
Who knew that you were capable of using a shell as a shield, even if it was a nut? I guess that must be the equivalent of my shield, I said. In any case, you bounced those Deku nuts back at those mad scrubs, though you did get hurt in the process, said Twilight. While my moves were impressive according to her, I wouldn't call them perfect, given how I got hit several times, and almost getting myself caught when I almost fell to the ground. I really do need more flying practice, which makes me wonder why I wasn't born as a Pegasus instead of a unicorn. We have one more mad scrub left to deal with, and a platform which moves from one side to the other before rising up to where that entrance is. I don't think using my shield will help this time, I said. Shame you didn't get any magic jars, said Twilight. But I did get some Deku nuts along the way, I smiled as I juggled a couple of them in my hand. These nuts may not appear to be of much use, but they are able to stun enemies for a few moments when they flash, and that can get rather annoying, as I've almost gone blind from the impact. On the other hand, they can destroy weak monsters with ease, provided that I hit the target in the correct location. I've only got about 5 of these, so that should be enough to get past this last mad scrub. What surprises me is that we've made plenty of noise while up here, yet none of the guards below have taken any notice. Maybe it's how they were programmed? Asked Twilight. Never thought I'd hear you say something like that, given such a word doesn't exist in Equestria, I replied. I've brought it up once or twice, said Twilight. I keep on forgetting this world is just a video game, so certain characteristics are ones I have no control over because those who made this game did so in a certain fashion. As long as those Deku scrubs below continue to mind their own business, I've nothing to worry about until I have to deal with the ones inside of the throne room, and that includes Tree Hugger and her advisors. Remember when I told you that you can drop Deku nuts onto the mad scrubs? Asked Twilight. Yes, I answered. Now's the chance to try it for yourself, as you have some nuts on hand, and I think it's the only way you'll be able to defeat it. Be careful though, Sunset, as when you're flying, you have no means of deflecting attacks, so getting hit would be an absolute disaster. I suggest to watch the movements of that mad scrub closely in order to judge when would be the best moment to move in. Suggested Twilight. She didn't have to rub in the fact that one small mistake would mean having to come all the way back up here, or even worse, get captured by those guards, but then I'm used to having pressure riding down on my back. After looking at its behavior for about a minute, I concluded that the mad scrub pops its head up from the flower it hides in, waits a few seconds to see what happens, and then attacks by spitting out a single Deku nut before going back down again, where it repeats the process. Maybe I can move when it first pops out, I suggested. You would need to avoid any projectiles, said Twilight. Good point. I mean, I can maneuver myself a little while airborne, but I might not be fast enough, I said.
Looking up at the sky quickly, I noticed that it was changing color, indicating that the night was almost over, and the second day would be beginning probably within the next hour. Have I seriously spent half the night in this palace? It felt like I've been here a lot longer, and it felt like being in Canterlot all over again. Only without the swamp motif, which is pretty self-evident. Getting back to what I needed to do, I waited for the mad scrub to hide before diving down into the deku flower, and launching myself into the sky. It then popped up and spat out a deku nut despite me not being in its radius, but then it was probably a natural reaction, yet I avoided the nut which sailed harmlessly before colliding with the wall, while I flew over until I was right on top, where I dropped a nut of my own which defeated it instantly before landing.
Didn't think that would be so effective. Well, you did bounce their own deku nuts back at them, which caused the same result, said Twilight. Guess they are more powerful in Termina as opposed to Hyrule, I said. In any case, we can now continue, smiled Twilight. There was something else I'm supposed to do, but I'm struggling to remember what it was. Something that I need. Gasp. Didn't that guy who is Pinky's father in this world mention about taking a picture of the Deku Queen?
I asked. It's amazing how I suddenly recall this right now, just as we were about to encounter the imprisoned monkey on the right side of the cage, yet why didn't I do this sooner given how close I was to Tree Hugger at the time?
I wish I could have taken a photo, as I really wanted that prize, for it could be useful.
I began cursing myself for not doing something so obvious, but then Twilight's expression made me feel a little better.
You think there's still a chance? If that pictograph box has the ability to zoom in, you may be able to take a picture, but we need to remain quiet, for if they spot us in the cage, we could get into all sorts of trouble, and then we'd have to reset time, and go through all this again,
replied Twilight. It was my own fault for not doing this earlier, but I'll take a picture first before speaking with the monkey. Once I dove into the Deku flower the mad scrub had been using, I waited until the moving platform was in range before launching myself, and landing on it where I had to dive down one more time because apparently it has become a thing here. After making my way onto the ledge connected to the entrance, I walked inside before experiencing a slight drop.
Oof.
I whispered.
Are you alright?
Whispered Twilight.
I wasn't expecting that to happen, I whispered.
My rear was slightly bruised, but I'll survive, so I got back onto my feet and looked at my surroundings. We were back in the throne room, but now we were on the other side of the cage where the monkey was located. He was definitely not having a good time as he was struggling to break free, but I doubt he'll be able to break free of those ropes as they appear to be really tight. My unexpected landing hadn't caused me to draw any attention my way, and even the monkey hadn't taken notice, so I quietly tiptoed behind the pole until I was on the edge of the cage looking through the bars.
There's Tree Hugger over there on her throne, yet she looks even more tense than before. Do you suppose her advisors have been pressuring her?
Whispered Twilight.
Maybe, and if that is the case then we need to work fast, I whispered. Take the picture quickly, Sunset, and hope that thing doesn't produce a bright flash, whispered Twilight.
Reaching for the pictograph box around my neck, I began looking at Tree Hugger, who coincidentally was looking in my direction. Good thing this pictograph box was essentially a rather primitive camera, or better yet, a rather primitive cell phone, for I knew exactly how to use it. I guess being a human has its advantages after all. Once I zoomed in as close as possible, which was a thing, I waited for Tree Hugger to remain perfectly still, and I took the picture, which produced a weak flash, and no one in the vicinity took notice.
That was easy, I whispered.
You almost gave me a heart attack, whispered Twilight, who was checking her chest to make sure her heart was still beating.
Now we can focus on the monkey, and hopefully he'll be more cooperative this time, I whispered.
I tiptoed back behind the pole, making sure not to let myself be seen by anyone including the monkey, and when I was back where I started, I inched forward slightly so that the monkey would take notice of me. Yeah, I know what I just did makes no sense, but my aim is not to be spotted by all those Deku scrubs in the throne room, as I won't be able to overcome that many all at once.
Oh. You? How did you get here? I used the secret passage which your brother told me, I replied. So, you really want to speak with me? Yes, you must, otherwise you wouldn't have come all this way, but you need to remain quiet. If they see you, they'll capture you, and your punishment will surely be death if the advisors of the Deku Queen allow it. The Queen is a gentle soul, yet her advisors believe that the Deku should have more influence in the world. Why listen to them?
I asked.
The Deku Queen chose those four to be her advisors in the hopes of quelling their lust for power, yet it seems her decision was in vain as they have been increasing their power and influence these past few years, but they would never overthrow her unless they believe her to be unfit to rule over the Deku. By the way, why did you want to speak with me in the first place? I assumed you were just like the other Deku, yet you've been listening to me this entire time.
His words sounded confusing at first, but it quickly dawned on me that he was acting in such a manner because of being ignored, and I was the first person, Deku in his case, to actually want to listen to him. I guess the Deku princess being abducted has closed their ears to the truth, and all they can hear are sounds of wanting someone to suffer.
Your brother,
I said.
What? My brother asked for your help? Ugh. I'm terribly sorry. Just try to cut my rope. We'll talk after that. Again, make sure to remain quiet. I don't want you to get into trouble because of listening to your heart, and I certainly don't want to be punished even more than I already am.
I then walked around behind the monkey to take a closer look at the ropes which bound him, and as I suspected before, they are really tight. In fact, I don't think I can cut them in my current form. If I were to use a bubble on the ropes, it would just make them wet, and nothing more.
What are you doing back there? Quick, cut this rope, and free me. I'm not sure I can hold out like this for much longer.
He didn't need to be so rude about it, for I was working as fast as I can to cut him loose.
What should I do?
I whispered.
You won't be able to cut the ropes, so you'll need to become human again, and cut them with your sword,
replied Twilight. Guess that means I'll be resuming my true self for just a brief moment, and I'll have to cut the ropes from the safety of the shadows in order to avoid being seen. Grabbing my face, I pulled the Deku mask off until I was human again, and drew the Kokiri sword from its scabbard.
Okay, you need to perform a jump attack, which is where you jump into the air while swinging your sword forward with all the strength you can muster.
Twilight made sure to provide me with a demonstration in case I didn't know what she was talking about, but I'm quite the fast learner, and I knew what she was talking about. Performing the jump attack while making sure not to create any kind of noise, my efforts were in vain for the ropes refused to break.
Hey! That Deku scrub! Where did she go?
The monkey wasn't aware that I changed forms, so when I presented myself, and explained that I was the Deku, he laughed it off as though I were trying to make him feel better, but I refused to start an argument with him, and then explained that the ropes couldn't be cut.
No good, after all. I thought you could free me, or that Deku scrub could achieve the same thing, but I guess those ropes are too tight.
I felt crestfallen because I wasn't able to help the monkey, but then he suddenly began making some slight noises which he stopped doing shortly afterwards due to the Deku scrubs looking in this direction. They quickly went back to what they were doing before, and I breathed a sigh of relief.
Sorry about that, but I realized that you can help me in another way. You don't happen to have something that can make a lot of noise? Like a loud instrument with sound that carries a long way? If you have one, show it to me. Why?
I asked.
While you may not be able to save me, you may still be able to save the Deku princess, and she in turn can save me before I am punished by the Deku tribe. Please. An instrument that can blare out a lot of sound that'll carry a long way. If you have something like that, then this will be perfect for both of us.
My instincts told me to take out the Ocarina of Time, so I reached into the pouch where I keep it safe, and took it out before raising it to my mouth, yet judging from the disappointed expression on the monkey's face, this isn't what he had in mind.
That tiny thing will never do. Its sound won't carry far enough. Don't you have something else? Something that can unleash a powerful sound which can heard for miles around. Twilight. I don't have anything like that.
I whispered.
Let me think for a moment here, Sunset.
Whispered Twilight as she started to concentrate, and a few moments later she came to a conclusion.
Remember when you first got your ocarina back from Starlight Glimmer?
How could I forget, for that's when I had that memory of Princess Zelda.
When you played the Song of Time, instead of using that instrument, you ended up using something else completely.
My eyes lit up upon hearing her say that, for I do recall using a different instrument.
Looks like you need to become a Deku scrub again, and use the instrument that form uses.
Twilight then looked over at the Deku scrubs before turning her attention back to me, and I knew that my transformation could alert them to my presence, but what other choice did I have?
Okay, I'll go back to being a Deku scrub,
I whispered. Placing the ocarina on the floor, I took out the Deku scrub when I let out a quiet sigh before putting it on, and once again my body started convulsing as the magic began to work, and my body was about to change, but not before letting out that scream which surprisingly didn't cause the Deku to take notice, which was another sigh of relief for me. Once I became a Deku scrub again. After needing a few seconds to get adjusted, I picked up the ocarina, and raised it to my mouth where it changed into the other instrument from before. The monkey noticed my transformation, and was in shock over how a human had suddenly changed, but that wasn't his real concern, for when he saw me using the ocarina, his excitement reached a fevered pitch which did alert the Deku scrubs except for Tree Hugger, who remained oblivious to it.
Oh. You have them. You do. Just like the princess. Deku pipes. Those will work great. Deku pipes?
I asked.
That's the name of that instrument you have there, but only a few Deku scrubs are able to use them, for it's an instrument which is very difficult to master. I just saw you change from a human into a Deku scrub, and I'll admit that was surprising, yet you were telling me the truth. I'm not sure how you are capable of this as it looks magical, but it does mean you can help me. By the way, who are you? Sunset Shimmer,
I whispered.
That's an unusual name, but pay me no mind as it's not my place to judge one such as you. Anyway, you must listen to what I have to say because you're the only one that I can turn to. I've been trying to get the other Deku, including the Deku Queen, to hear my words, yet they ignore me at every turn, and those advisors are dead set on punishing me. As you probably know by now, Woodfall has been plagued with a terrible poison which has been corrupting the swamp. I was trying to find out more about the situation, so I went to Woodfall Temple above the waterfall with the Deku Princess, but the temple had become a monster's lair.
This probably wasn't the best idea that I've heard, but I suppose there weren't that many options to consider. Still, I have to give props to this monkey for wanting to do something about it instead of just lamenting about, and waiting for disaster to come.
What happened to the Deku Princess?
I asked.
She was captured by the monster. And before I was able to save her, it summoned strange creatures which forced me to abandon her. When I came out of the temple by myself, I tried to find someone who could help me rescue her, but some of the Deku scrub guards were waiting for me by the entrance to Woodfall proper, and you already know the results.
The monkey then started to whimper, which caused my heart to ache, yet this was information I've been needing, for now I know what needs to be done. I'm the only one who can resolve all of this, so it looks as though my first true test will begin relatively soon. The only thing that prevents me from doing anything is not knowing how to gain access to the temple, but I had a hunch this monkey knows how to get around that.
I've been imprisoned here ever since, and while the Deku Queen feels that I am innocent, the same can't be said about her advisors. What about them?
I asked.
They think I kidnapped the princess, and they won't listen to a word I say, all while trying to convince the Deku Queen to carry out a suitable punishment. Even though I want to go to Woodfall Temple and save her, I'm unable to do so because these ropes are too strong for either one of us to break. But you can go there in my stead. Do you understand my plight?
I nodded my head to confirm this, but I then told the monkey that I needed to have a moment with my fairy companion, so I turned around to face Twilight, who had been taking all of this in.
What do you think?
I whispered.
This is a dire situation, and one we just can't ignore,
whispered Twilight.
Not only do we need to resist their princess, we also need to find anything which can help us stop the moon from destroying this world,
I whispered.
Looks like we've got a double duty on our hands,
whispered Twilight. I turned back to the monkey, and told him that Twilight agreed with my decision in that we would go there in his stead, and the expression he had made me smile, for he had been using an expression of despair for quite some time.
I had a feeling you were going to accept, otherwise you wouldn't have gone to all this trouble just to speak to me. Now I really need you to listen to me carefully, for I'm only able to do the following once. When you enter the central part of this region, which is known as Woodfall, you will find a shrine which has been used by the Deku royal family for generations. This Deku shrine is a sacred place, and it is here that you must play the following song I am about to share with you. The temple will reveal itself to you when this song is played using the pipes which you possess. How did you come to know it?
I asked.
The princess taught it to me in case there was a time where I would need to teach it to someone else. We can't let them hear us, so I'll sing it softly. In case you were wondering why I need to be quiet about it, this song is only for the Deku royal family, so the fact that I know it will land me in more trouble than what I already have.
So to pass this song down to me, the monkey is willing to sacrifice his freedom. In my heart, I didn't want this to happen, but my mind insisted on learning this song, for the monkey's kind gesture must not be in vain.
Come closer, because you won't be able to hear this song from over there.
I moved forward slowly so as to not let the Deku know I'm there, and once I was close enough, the monkey began speaking in what sounded like gibberish at first, yet it was making traditional monkey noises in different pitches. Upon doing this twice, it fell onto me to play those sounds through the Deku pipes, yet I haven't had much experience using them.
This could take a few moments, I whispered. Before you play, allow me to tell you more about this song. It's called the Sonata of Awakening, and when played on anyone or anything which appears to be sleeping, they will awake instantly upon hearing its mysterious melody. Know that only a loud instrument can get the most use out of this song.
After spending a couple of minutes Tuesday figuring out how these pipes worked, I tried to play this song with some rather disastrous results, such as playing wrong notes, using the wrong kind of pitch, and even forgetting how the song went at one point. Eventually, after numerous attempts, I managed to play it correctly, and its loud sound echoed throughout the throne room, which was a blessing because I was impressed with its range, but also a curse as it meant my presence is now known to the Deku Scrubs.
Wow! That song is making my chakra ebb and flow in such righteous ways,
commented Tree Hugger.
Your Majesty! Isn't that the song which only the royal family is allowed to know? Now that you mention it, I do recognize that song as the Sonata of Awakening. Whoever just played that has some radical musical skills, and could possibly equal the talent, or perhaps exceed what my daughter can do,
replied Tree Hugger.
The monkey who kidnapped the Deku princess has taught that sacred song to another, which means he is guilty. No need to be so harsh about it,
said Tree Hugger.
We must insist on punishing the foolish monkey much sooner than expected, for this act cannot be allowed to stand. I know that you hold no ill will towards the monkey, but you have to think of how your people feel. They desire justice to be served as they feel the monkey has wronged our people, and you must show them true leadership skills, otherwise they could overthrow you in an act of sheer rage. Would they totally do that?
Asked Tree Hugger.
In an instant. Their vibes really need to mellow out, otherwise they could hurt themselves, but I suppose you are correct in that I must perform my duty. My aura is going to suffer a little because of this, but I must appease my people even if my heart doesn't feel right. Attention Deku Scrubs! The punishment of this monkey will now take place much sooner than expected, so please prepare the necessary items, but do not harm him until everything has been set up accordingly,
said Tree Hugger. My heart suddenly started beating rapidly upon hearing what Tree Hugger just said, and then I turned towards the monkey, who simply shook his head as indication that I shouldn't worry about him. I may be able to reset time, but it doesn't change the fact that this is just unbearable knowing that this is going to happen until I can break the curse of Woodfall Temple. Looking at Tree Hugger, I noticed all of the Deku Scrubs were now looking at me, and I felt really uncomfortable knowing something bad was about to happen.
What am I going to do?
I asked.
You can't fight all of them at once as they clearly outnumber you,
replied Twilight.
And the entrance we used to get in here can't be reached even if I were to change back into a human,
I said. The entrance in question was at a high elevation in this room, so there was no way I could reach it, which means I'm trapped in here.
You would better take the shortcut the Deku used to get to Woodfall Temple. I'm not sure I'll be able to, as they look as though they are ready to storm this cage, I said. Remain calm, Sunset, for I'm sure we can figure a way out of this,
said Twilight. The reason she is feeling so calm is that as a fairy, she can just float away without having to face any kind of consequences, yet I have to endure whatever is about to happen.
And what about the Deku who just played the sacred song? I'm sure they were totally unaware of that little bit of information, but since I can see the expression on your face, you want them to be punished as well? There is going to be a major shift in vibes by the time this has been resolved, yet I must once again appease my people even if my aura tells me that this Deku Scrub is innocent. All I ask in return is for you to be gentle, nothing too serious,
replied Tree Hugger.
Guards! Capture that Deku in the cage. Here they come,
said Twilight.
You must hurry. If you don't, I will be punished by the Deku tribe.
The monkey's pleas for help rang throughout my ears, but before I could say or do anything, a large number of Deku suddenly surrounded me on all sides as though they had just come out of the woodwork or something. It also doesn't help that my movements are limited due to still having these pipes out, but I suppose it wouldn't have mattered either way. In an instant, I was bombarded by Deku Scrubs and everything went black. To be continued. End of chapter.